Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 5 and the final of the short Banana Wars series. The Banana Wars were a series of US invasion/interventions in Latin America during the early 20th century. This series is meant to give a little insight as to what occurred during these events that in many ways have impacted the citizens of these nations until modern day. In today's episode, we'll be looking at the US occupation of the Dominican Republic. Following the end of the Dominican Civil War in late 1912, the nation's government still had a variety of factions that were established during the Civil War, and they worked to undermine each other for presidency. This gridlock continued for years until 1914, when the US administration under Woodrow Wilson sent an ultimatum to the island, stating that they had to choose a legitimate president or have the US install one. A provisional president was chosen, and later the same year, relatively free elections put former President Juan Isrado Yémez Piñera back into power. To achieve a more broadly supported government, Yémez named opposition candidates to his cabinet, but this brought no peace. Former Secretary of War Desidero Arias aimed to depose Yémez. Against US wishes, Yémez agreed to resign by the end of May 1916. His resignation started the US invasion and the occupation of the Republic. The first landing took place on May the 5th of 1916, when two companies of Marines landed at Santo Domingo. Their goal was to offer protection to the US Legion and the US Consulate, and to occupy Fort San Gimignano. 2 days later, Yémez resigned, with Arias taking power. US Admiral Caperton's forces occupied Santo Domingo on May the 5th. Marines took the key port cities of Puerto Plata and Montecristi on June the 1st and enforced a blockade. 2 days after the Battle of Guayanillas on July the 3rd, Marine forces moved to Arias' stronghold in Santiago de los Caballeros. However, a military counter was avoided when Arias arrived in agreement to cease resistance. 3 days after he left the country, the rest of the occupation forces landed and took control of the country within 2 months. On November the 29th of 1916, the United States imposed a military government under Captain Harry Shepard. Marines claimed to have restored order throughout most of the Republic, with the exception of the eastern region, but resistance continued widespread. The occupation administration, however, stated that because the country's budget was balanced and its economic growth was directed toward the US, that it was stable and working as intended. A professional military organization was established and took away the power from local elites and made soldiers more loyal to the national government. It was named the Dominican Constabulary Guard and replaced the former forces responsible for the Civil War with groups less hostile to the US occupation. Most Dominicans, however, greatly resented the loss of their sovereignty. A guerrilla movement known as Guerrilleros enjoyed considerable support from the population in the east. Having knowledge of the local terrain, they fought from 1917 to 1921 against the US occupation. The fighting in the countryside ended in a stalemate, and the guerrillas agreed to a conditional surrender. After World War I, public opinion in the United States began to run against the occupation. President Warren G. Harding had campaigned against the occupation of both Haiti and the Dominican Republic. In June of 1921, US representatives presented a withdrawal proposal known as the Hardy Plan, which called for Dominican ratification of all acts of the military government, approved of a loan of $2.5 million for public works and other expenses, the acceptance of the US officers for the Constabulary, and the holding of elections under US supervision. Reaction to the plan was overwhelmingly negative by the public. Moderate Dominican leaders, however, used the plan as a basis for future negotiations that resulted in a further agreement on June the 30th of 1922, allowing for the selection of a provisional president to rule until elections could be organized. Under the supervision of High Commissioner Sumner Welles, Juan Beniste Vici Borgas assumed the provisional presidency on October the 21st of 1922. In the presidential election of March of 1924, Parias Vasquez Lahara, an American ally who cooperated with the US government, handily defeated the Alliance Party and also won a comfortable majority in both houses of Congress. With his inauguration on July the 13th, control of the republic returned to Dominican hands.